I bought the camera at this store, and now I want to return it.
Sorry, Karen. The code on the camera doesn't match the one on the box.
I don't care. This is ridiculous. I want to speak to your manager.
r/Entitled Parents. Our first story we'll be reading today. Entitled Parent tries to return camera, gets the cops called on her. From user Cold Silver D. After that, My Entitled Parent Saga, Episode 1. From user JACT Printing. And then we'll be wrapping up with Sorry if my workplace doesn't take your currency, Entitled Person. From user Dark. Thank you so much to our authors for letting us read your stories. And if you're an author who would like me to read your stories next, please submit them to the r/Mr. Reddit subreddit. And if you're new, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications for new stories every single day. Entitled Parent tries to return camera, gets the cops called on her. Hello, Mr. Reddit and the Re-Army. I really enjoyed your YouTube videos the last few months and finally remembered that I have an entitled parent story of my own. I used to work at a Walmart some 10-odd years ago. Originally hired as a cashier, I made the mistake of accepting a position in customer service, so not worth the 25-cent raise. You know all those stereotypical customer horror stories? Yeah, they're true. I've seen many things, both horrible and mind-boggling, but this is the only entitled parent that stands out in memory, mostly because of the results. The worst time to work customer service, or at all really, at Walmart is the 24th of December and the 26th of December. Yep, Christmas Eve and the day after Christmas. I personally call the 26th National Return Your Unwanted Gift Day. It brings out the worst in people, though I found it was oftentimes because it's busy and crowded and would rather be spending time with their family, and not because they are entitled or crazy. PSA. While it might not be as personal, gift cards are universal. Let people get what they want and save an associate. This event was over 2 days, the 26th and 27th. Yes, the 27th isn't much better. Or the 28th. Or the 29th. Our cast. We've got me, Cold Silver D, whose soul has not quite yet been crushed by Blue Box Mart. We've got Poor Kid of Entitled Parent, caught in the crossfire. We've got Entitled Parent. We've got Camera Guy. He's the cool dude. We've got Customer Service Managers. Awesome ladies. We've got Support Manager. Guy who won't take any BS. All dialogue is approximated. It was more than 10 years ago, but it will get the general gist of it. It's the 26th of December. My coworkers and I had been handling the massive line that went to, and at one point, outside the door. It was a supercenter, Walmart plus full grocery store, so you can imagine just how long that is. Now double it. Poor Kid comes to me with a camera. Generally, if something was under $100, policy ended up being, give it to them. They aren't worth the trouble. As long as it was approved by a CSM or other manager. Sometimes if it was over $100, but not usually. Camera returns, on the other hand, were one of the few policies management backed up 100%, at least at this store when I was there. The procedure was very specific. The registration code for the camera must match both the receipt and the box. Yes, the box too. Then the associate in charge of cameras must approve the return. And that is where it begins. Me. Welcome to Walmart. How may I help you today? Poor Kid. Yeah, got this camera for Christmas and need to return it. To this day, I have no idea how or why the camera code matched the receipt but not the box. I honestly don't know if it was a screw up on the vendor's side or Poor Kid and Entitled Parent got 2 cameras and mixed the boxes up. I'm sorry, but I can't do this return. What? Why? The codes for this camera don't match the box. Poor kid looks at the receipt. But the code here matches the camera. I now know that I have to follow procedure completely. To save time, I'll summarize. I call up CG, told him codes didn't match, but the customer is insisting. Not rudely, but still insisting. CG comes down, checks, says no. Poor kid complains. Again, not rudely. I call CSM over. They say the same. No go. I do mention that the camera and receipt match. Still no on both CG and CSM's parts. Poor kid looks disappointed, but took the camera and left. He had no attitude through the whole thing other than annoyance and a little disbelief, and I felt kind of sorry for him. I promptly forgot about it and went back to returns. That, obviously, is not the end of it. The next day, poor kid returns, and this time with his mother, the entitled parent. She did not look pleased and was aggressive and belligerent through the entire thing. I barely managed my greeting when the interaction began.
I want to return this camera. Let me make it clear. I am not happy. My son should have gotten this done yesterday, but you denied him the refund. I live in this location, and it's a chore to come down here.
To note, if I remember correctly, the place was a suburb, maybe a half an hour drive, which in that area is not that far, relatively speaking. I personally had a 10-minute drive, and I lived literally up the street. Weather was fine that day, so while there was snow on the ground, it had been plowed, and the walks were salted. So annoying, but not as bad as she was making it out to be. Thinking, here we go again, I follow procedure. I glance at the receipt, camera, and box. Yep, nothing changed magically overnight. I'm sorry, ma'am, but I can't return this. The codes don't match.
BS. Return it. I bought it here, and you have to refund it.
I'm sorry, but policy says I can't. I have to get camera department's approval, and since they said no yesterday, I can tell you they won't approve it today.
I don't care. Do it anyway.
I sigh and call camera guy. Camera department. Hey, camera guy. It's Cold Silver D from customer service. You remember that camera from yesterday? They're back. Seriously? Yup. Code on receipt and camera matches, but box doesn't. Did you tell them about the policy? Yup. Still demands the return. I'll be right up. When he arrives, I hand him the camera and he does his thing. I'm sorry, but policy is that we cannot return a camera unless all 3 of the codes match. No exceptions.
What? How can 2 match, but the 3rd doesn't?
Since it's the receipt and the camera that match, that argument is actually somewhat valid. Sorry, no exceptions.
I want to see your manager.
I sigh, knowing that this is going to play out the same as yesterday, and call over CSM. CSM. How can I help you, ma'am? It was a different CSM from the day before, so she wasn't aware of the situation. Entitled parent goes off on her. Staying calm, CSM responds verbatim what camera guy had just said.
What do you mean you can't return it? How can the codes not match? This is BS. I want this returned. I bought it here, and I want my refund. I want to speak to your manager.
There was a lot of language and a few insults mixed in, but I don't remember specifics. After I explained to CSM about the previous day, she radios for SM. All the while, the argument continues to circle. SM was a great support manager. He treated us with respect, was tough but fair, and was a great guy to work with. One thing about him, he was retired Navy. Not a SEAL or anything hardcore, but he was tough, and he did not take any BS. You did not mess with his associates. SM. How may I help you today, ma'am?
Your useless employees won't return this camera. I bought it here, and I demand a refund, especially after all this trouble.
Please calm down, ma'am. Tell me what is going on. I give him a brief rundown, again mentioning the matching camera and receipt, but not the box. Then she gives her side. What did camera guy say? Not all three match, so he said no. Then I'm sorry, ma'am. Policy says we cannot return this camera unless all three match. She goes ballistic. From then on, it was the same circular argument, but with a lot more language. The longer it went on, the louder it got. Finally, SM had enough. Ma'am, I'm sorry. Unless you calm down, I'm going to have to ask you to leave. She gets in his face, yelling up a storm. If she hadn't been causing a scene before, she really was now. He just remained neutral the entire time, but he had had enough. He escalated it. It's the busiest day/time for customer service department, and she is holding up the line completely now. She needs to go. Ma'am, you will leave right now, or I will call the police.
No, you won't. I bought this here. I have the receipt, so I am entitled to my refund. Give me my money back. Now!
Ma'am, I am not bluffing. I will call the police if you do not leave now.
Yeah, right. Like I really believe that. Give me my refund.
SM then pulls out his cell and calls the non-emergency number. After addressing the police and explaining the situation, she realized he was not bluffing. She left in a hurry, yelling the entire time. I had lost track of poor kid and the entire thing, but I assume he followed. Once she was gone, SM told the police she had left and weren't needed anymore. Funny thing, she didn't take the camera with her, so no refund, and now she doesn't have the camera either. And she is banned from the store, so she can't come back for it either. Next we've got My Entitled Parents Saga, Episode 1. Mr. Reddit, first, let me say thank you so much for putting my first post in one of your videos. I got a real kick out of it, and so did my family. This story is about my entitled mother. Disclaimer: on computer, English and bad English are my only two languages. Spelling and grammar errors are entirely my fault. This also happened 20 years ago and spanned a few months, so no real dialogue. Sorry about that. Cast: we've got me, youngest son, in my late 30s now. We've got my older entitled brother, pushing 40 now. We've got awesome dad, coolest and nicest guy I ever met. And we've got entitled mom. I don't know how awesome dad stayed with her for so long. Finally divorced her recently. Background: entitled mom has always favored entitled brother. He has been the golden child our entire lives up until the past couple years in her eyes. You know, the kid who gets everything handed to him on a silver platter while the other kid gets ignored. Awesome dad has always tried to treat us fairly and equally, but entitled mom has always made that difficult. My brother and I shared a room growing up. There are lots of examples of this, and I'll post more if people want to hear them. On to the story. When I was a teenager, being 2 years younger than my brother, I saw a lot of bias by my mother against me. When I was 12, I started working, mowing lawns, walking dogs, riding to the store to get elderly neighbors their groceries, etc., and saved enough money to buy myself a little garbage Honda Civic. I did some work on it and then traded it for an early 70s Volkswagen Beetle. When my brother turned 15, my mother helped him get his learner's permit and then traded my Beetle for a Volkswagen Rabbit Diesel, which she gave him as a gift for his 16th birthday. I turned 14 2 months after he got his car. About 2 weeks before my birthday, my mom bought an '86 gray Toyota Celica GT that didn't run and told me it would be my car when I turned 16. I was excited and started working on it. My father is a mechanic and taught me a lot. I got the car running well using my money to replace the starter, battery, plugs, wires, fuel lines, etc. I then replaced the driver's seat and some interior trim on the car. When I was 15, I was ready to get my permit. At this time, my mother decided not to let me get it, as she
Was too busy to drive with me and just didn't want to.
She did not work at this time, and I did most of the housework, including laundry, cleaning, and dishes. My father, who worked 60 hours a week, tried to convince her to let me get my license, but she refused. At this time, she stopped driving her Lincoln much and started driving my Celica everywhere. I turned 16 without license or permit and still trying to convince her to let me get it. The week after my birthday, my brother, who is now 18, had no job and lived at home, was hot rodding his Volkswagen, and no surprise, it broke down. My mom decided to buy him an '87 red Toyota Celica. She thought it was great that her and my brother had matching cars. One more year passed. I was 17 and still didn't have my license. My mom was still driving my Celica and barely driving her Lincoln. My brother had failed out of high school and was going to an alternative school. He started getting into bad things and partying with all of his friends in the alternative school. That Christmas, my only Christmas present from my mom was that she said we could go down the next week and finally get my permit. The very next weekend, 2 days after I got my permit, my brother was at a pasture party with his friends and decided to drive home. You can guess where this is going. He was lucky he didn't end up in the hospital, but the car was totaled. If you're thinking that my mom gave him my Celica, you'd be right. The next week, she handed him the keys to it, and they went down and put it in his name. Now, legally, they could do that, because since I was a minor, the car was in her name to begin with. Legally, they could, but morally, it was just wrong. She did start driving with me at this point, every once in a while, in her Lincoln. I asked her what I was going to do for a car, as she sold my first one and then gave my brother my second one. Her response was,
You work. Buy yourself another car.
This got very hard, as right after New Year's, she made me quit my job, and a couple weeks later, she cleared out my bank account. Almost $1,800 to pay for a trip she took halfway across the country. I did have $400 that I had stashed between the pages of a book in my room a couple months earlier. I was wanting to buy a special gift for my mom for Mother's Day that next year. As if. Having only $400 and no income, I had to take what I could get, and so I bought an old Oldsmobile Cutlass. My brother moved out right after his 20th birthday to move in with a friend right down the road. I was able to finally get my license 1 month before I turned 18. I also graduated from high school 3 weeks before my birthday. My brother, who is 2 years and 2 months older than me, graduated from his alternative school 1 day before I did. 3 days after I graduated, my mom decided she wanted to turn my room into a hobby room and kicked me out. I had no money and nowhere to go, but she gave me 1 week to figure it out. My girlfriend, who became my wife and is the love of my life, and her family welcomed me with open arms, and I lived with them for almost a year. Just a week after I was kicked out, my brother and his friend moved into my room and stayed there for about 6 months. My mother never even started turning it into her hobby room and admitted years later that she kicked me out because she wanted my brother and his friend to have the room. She has never to this day paid me back 1 red cent for the 2 cars she took from me or the bank account she cleared out. She says I should be grateful that she only took that much to pay her back for all she spent raising me. In the 20 years since the end of this story, she has bought my brother 4 other cars, given him thousands of dollars, and bailed him out of jail over a dozen times. I've never asked her for anything, and she has taken much more from me over the years, but that is another story. If you made it this far, thank you so much for reading. and sorry it was so long-winded. And our final story of the day. Sorry if my workplace doesn't take your currency, entitled person. Hey, Mr. Reddit. Listening to all the entitled parent stories every day, going to and from work, and can't stop laughing at the voices you do. And boy, do I deal with a lot of entitled people. So more posts if you enjoy it. I'm on mobile, so excuse the grammar errors. We'll do updates on it when I can. English is my first language, so don't roast me too bad. Thanks. On to the story. Our cast. We've got me. We've got awesome customer. We've got entitled man. And finally, we've got awesome coworker. A little bit of background. So I only started working at this job a while ago, 3 months to be exact, and we used to always take this certain currency until recently where the currency had new notes that had a different covering on it instead of what it used to be, so we don't accept the old notes of said currency. Anyway, on to the story. And this only happened yesterday during my work shift. Awesome coworker and myself were working away as a rush had just come in from a lot of flights. Yes, I work at an airport. So awesome coworker served entitled man and didn't know about not taking the old notes. So anyway, I was busy with my own queue of people when, lo and behold, I get to entitled lady. I scan her stuff through, not a bother, and once I've gotten her total, she goes to give me the old currency, and I attempt to explain why we don't take the old notes, but she's not having any of it, and shoves the stuff at me and goes in anger. Awesome customer comes up next, wondering what that was about. I explain it briefly while serving him, when all you hear by the window is dear old entitled man.
What's the problem with taking the currency? It's the new one.
Me, trying to keep calm and not from breaking down. I don't deal well with being yelled at. Sorry, it's just that we don't take this currency anymore. But he's not having it.
You were talking down to my wife, and you can take your stuff back.
He goes back to where he was sitting prior to this point, I guess to save a seat, and then proceeds to slam the food and drinks he had bought.
I want the money I paid him,
pointing to awesome coworker.
And I want it now.
All of this was going down during a major rush, so we're trying to get everyone served as quickly as possible. Awesome coworker tries to explain as well, but entitled man is having none of it. But he gives him back the money he gave him, but due to the fact of how rude he was, awesome coworker slams it onto the window, and of course, as we all know, entitled people always have something to say.
You can shove it where the sun don't shine.
Me, being absolutely done with him at this point. I'm surprised you know where that is, 'cause you don't know when to keep your mouth shut and let someone explain something that you clearly don't understand. Now I know I went a bit too far, but after all the screaming he did at me and awesome coworker, he kinda deserved it for being a jerk. Anyway, that's one of the many entitled parent stories I have from my new job. There's plenty more where that came from, and I know this post probably suits better in r/tales from retail, but it was an entitled person, so I thought it would be better here. And congrats to our re-generals of the day, Adam Gaming, Chissy Spider, and Lotus. Become tomorrow's re-generals by dropping as many re's as you can in the comments below.